Okay, so we began this January with the idea of taking a vision quest. And in week 1, we were willing to leave what we knew. And I want you to see that a vision quest really is when a soul is ready to embrace what's next. See, every soul has a journey in life. Every soul has their path that they walk. And there comes a time when a soul knows that they're ready to take another step forward, to live a greater life, a higher life, a finer life. And one of the requirements to really do that is at some level we have to be willing to let go of what we know. Because as great and as wonderful as our life may be, or as scary and painful as it may be, we get used to it the way it is. We get used to it being a certain way. And it takes a moment where we're willing to embrace the unknown, to do that which we don't clearly understand, to move forward, to change, and there's a part of us, our human part of us, that just wants to hang on to what we've known. Even though it may be awful or terrible, we want to hang on to it because at least it was our mess, right? At least we know how to play that game, even though the game wasn't always very rewarding. It was something that we knew and were familiar with, and it didn't challenge us or scare us too much. And so leaving what we know is our soul's willingness to trust God, to trust the unknown at the next level. So over the last few weeks, I hope you've had an opportunity at least once to do that which you haven't done before, to leave what you knew, to really open a space to be surprised by God. And then the second week we talked about confronting our fears. Because one of the things that happens if you leave what you know, for most of us, our first reaction to leaving what we knew is that our fears get right up in our face. How many of you in the last several weeks have had an opportunity to be confronted by your own fears? Isn't that fun? Like, for most of us, it's like, no, right? And in the presence of our fears, what we talked about and what tends to happen is that we tend to go unconscious and hurry up. And I shared that week about my own story of watching my first really scary movie as a kid at our next door neighbors, and what it was like to run from their front door. And thank goodness our front door was unlocked, because I would have just gone right through it. I mean, I barely got time to turn the knob as the weight of my body slammed into the door, right? And over again, in the presence of our fears, we tend to go faster. And in the presence of going faster, we tend to go unconscious. And I gave you an opportunity to really practice in the presence of your fears. What if you actually slowed down? What if, instead of closing your heart in the presence of your fears, what if you actually opened your heart and began to be intentional? Like, what is it that you really want? So even in the presence of your fears, to slow down and give yourself an opportunity to actually feel God, to feel the moment, to feel the possibilities that are right there. Because until we learn to begin to really manage our fears differently, we tend to live unconsciously. And I want you to see the real challenge of that is, until we're willing to manage our fears, we tend to live unconsciously. Because how many of us want to feel our fears? Right? We just don't, right? And so the best way we know not to feel our fears is just to go faster and go unconscious and just not see it. But the reality is that we just spend year after year living unconsciously instead of slowing down, opening our hearts, and getting intentional. So that was the second week. Then the third week, last week, I invited you to, if it's true as spiritual beings, that we're whole and complete and lacking in nothing, if it's true that we were created in the image and likeness of God, and we really are whole and complete and lacking in nothing, then every judgment that anyone has ever laid upon you, or every judgment that you've ever laid upon yourself, is a misuse of spiritual power. It's simply just not true. And that's why Jesus over and over again taught, judge not, right? And then he went on to say that the level you judge is the level that life has done onto you. And so over and over again he said, judge not. And so for the first 3 weeks, we experimented with doing something that we don't normally do. We began to practice managing our fears in a different way. And last week we were looking at suspending all judgment, and any judgment that had been laid upon us, or any judgment that we'd laid upon ourselves, or even laid upon somebody else. The idea is that that's the role of forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't really about forgiving what we've done, but it's about forgiving that those things could in any way tarnish us, or that those things could actually keep us from God. So in the presence of managing your fears differently, and in the presence of suspending all judgment, I want you to see that it really does create a different paradigm for living. Like, if you could live without fear and without judgment, what would you do with the rest of your life? If it was truly possible to live without fear and to live without judgment, what is the story that keeps you from fully expressing yourself? That most of us can think of a fear or two, or a judgment, or a belief about ourselves that has really over and over again kept us from being the next greatest version of ourselves. And what would happen if today you got so practiced in confronting your fears and suspending all the judgment that you decided, what the heck? What would it look like to fully unleash yourself upon the world? And I made the point last week that I believe that this is what leads to a profound spiritual experience. That as you come to know yourself again, as if for the first time, what you also come to know is God. That as you begin to see yourself with crystal clear eyes, you can't help but notice God in you. Paul said that now I see in the mirror dimly, but one day I will see face to face. And I want you to see how often, without fear and without judgment, you see yourself the very way God sees you. Do you think God ever freaks out about what's going on in your life? Right? Do you think God ever says, oh, what a loon? Well, maybe sometimes, right? Right? But I just can't believe that infinite intelligence and infinite love would ever look at you and see anything other than that you're whole and complete and lacking in nothing, could see anything other than your perfection, because it's out of that perfection that we were created. And what if we could live our life without fear and without judgment? Now, do you have any control of the fear, the judgment that other people yammer about you, right? No. But you have 100% control, and I want you to really hear this. You have 100% control over the fears and the judgment that you place on your own life, on your own self. You know, many of us have been led to believe that fear is always required. That it's just has to be. And that at some level we have to recline or draw back every time we're in fear so that we don't have to feel the fear. So we don't have to go unconscious. And what if you actually began to live this year without fear and without judgment? See, when we look at mythology, oftentimes mythology can tell a greater truth because it's not limited by facts. Right? So Harry Potter could teach spiritual truths in a way because it didn't have to be factual. It got to be possibilities, right? So in the story of Harry Potter, in the first book, in the story of Harry Potter, you'll remember probably, that Harry Potter got invited to go to Hogwarts. Remember? And Hogwarts was a university of magic. And he got to learn about his own magic. And he got to learn things about himself that he had no way of knowing before that. He got to learn that he was actually the child of a very magical set of parents that had a very special relationship with magic. And they got to learn all about the magic that was within him. And then at the end of that first semester, the first year of school, he had to go back to his aunt and his uncle. Remember that? And his aunt and his uncle, there was a term for people that didn't know their own magic. You remember what it was? They were muggles, right? And the muggles were people who didn't know their own magic. And his aunt and his uncle were definitely under the category of muggles. They didn't want to hear about magic. They didn't want to know about it. And even saying muggles, it sounds so, there's so much disdain, right? What a muggle, right? Right? And we can look at the times in our own life when we've been a muggle. It's like, I don't want any magic. I just want to get it done. What's the number here? What's the thing? What's practical? What's realistic? I just want to get it done. So Harry has this whole year of discovering his magic. And then he has to go back and live the summer with these muggles. And when I read it, I thought it was so unfair. Like, why wasn't there like a summer camp? If they could create a whole university of magic, they got to be able to come up with a summer camp. So all the kids that were being raised by muggles didn't have to go back to their muggles. They could go spend the whole summer with the happy people, even the scary magic people were better than muggles, right? And I thought it was so unfair, right? Because why? And the more that I explored it, the more that I realized the hero always has to go home. And it looks wrong. It looks like if we have these profound spiritual experiences, everybody should be transformed in front of our eyes, and we shouldn't have to put up with their shenanigans one moment longer, right? That they should be just as spiritually enlightened as we are, or as we think we are, or as we want to pretend we are, right? But the reality is, right, is that you have a profound spiritual experience, and most of the people in your life haven't changed one iota. And then the real question then becomes for you and for all of us, so how are you going to live that? How are you going to live that? Are you going to get arrogant about it? Or are you going to, you feel like they're victimizing you? How are you going to live that? Because what if your spiritual awakening wasn't just for you? What if it's really your gift to the world? What if it's the thing that you are called to bring greater love and light and peace and joy because you've seen a new way? What if you're now the one who's being called to make a difference? One of the things that has always struck me about the Dalai Lama is that the Dalai Lama is willing to continue, whether you believe this or not, to continue to reincarnate until there is no more suffering in any being on the planet. And I don't know if I could ever do that. Like, would I come back because one cat was suffering somewhere? Would I come back because one turtle was suffering somewhere, right? Would I come back because one person was suffering somewhere? And his commitment is that he's going to continue to incarnate over and over again in other lifetimes, over and over again. If you believe this, he's going to continue to do this until all suffering is removed, transformed on the planet. If you believe that. And I thought, what an incredible gift. Like, could there possibly be a greater gift than to be so committed to the light that even a flicker, even a shadow, you would come back again to make a difference right there. And so tonight, I want to talk about you. And I want to talk about how you're willing to live your spiritual essence in the world. How you're going to live your return back into the world after you awaken to all the good that God is. And so tonight I have 4 questions for you. And the first question that I have for you, let's shoot it up there so people can see it. First question is, who do you want to be? Now, one of the things that's interesting about this is that every time you have an awakening, a spiritual moment, it's really an opportunity to answer that question, who do I want to be? Do I want to be the person that I've always been or been for a long time or know myself? Or am I willing to be the next greatest version of myself? And what's so interesting about this for me is some of the people that are closest to you will want you to be who they know you to be. Is that true? They want you to, even if they didn't like you very much. Right? That never really made sense to me. They're not really happy with me, but they expect me to be this, and they're not really paying attention that I'm now I feel different. I'm acting different. I'm making new choices. I'm living my life in a new way. And there's something that happens that you have to be willing to be in the presence of people who keep wanting you to come back over here, even though you're making and living over here. Because in my experience, it takes them a while to catch up. Right? Because they're a little worried, or they're a little they're insecure, or they're not sure. And somehow it's just easier to relate to you the way they used to relate to you. So who do you want to be? Would you be willing to show up in a new way that's actually truer, more in keeping with your spirit, your essence, your life, and to be patient enough to let the world see the transformation? To let your friends and family see that maybe you don't react the same way you reacted. You don't have the same stuff that you used to have. You're actually different. So the first question is, who do you want to be? Would you be willing to be a new version of yourself? Second questions. What are the qualities, let's give it to him, what are the qualities that I want to live? And see, this is really even easier, right? Because there were certain qualities that you used to live, right? And yet you know that there's more of you that's wanting to be expressed. Like, as I've gone through this process this month, what I realize is there's an invitation before me to be more verbal. And you would think, oh my gosh, Richard, how could you ever be more verbal? Right? Like, Richard, blah, 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 right? Your mouth and words, they come out, right? Well, that's kind of the you that you see of me, right? But there's times when, according to people that love me, I'm not always very communicative. It's hard to believe, but I think it's just fair, right? And what I realized is the place where I tend to get the quietest the most is when I feel victimized. Now, I don't feel victimized very often, but when I feel victimized, I get quiet. And the belief that goes on in my head is I'm not going to get what I want anyway, so why bother wasting a lot of words around it? Right? Just get quiet, right? And what I've learned over and over again, especially in the last month, is that if I get quiet, it pretty much guarantees that I'm not going to get what I want. Because if I'm not being a voice for what I want, who's going to be a voice for what I want? That implies they have to be psychic enough to actually know what I want and use words for me and that I'm not willing to use for myself. And what I realized, in the moments when I feel the most victimized, I assume that the people around me don't want me to win. Does that make sense? And so because I assume they don't want me to win, I don't use my words. Now, if I assume that they do want me to win, guess what I do? I'm back to being Mr. Chatty Cathy. Right? True? And what I want you to see today is that every time we have a spiritual experience, I believe that there are qualities within you that now need to be expressed. They don't want to be expressed. They need to be expressed. That every time you have an experience of God, there's more of you that wants to come into the light. There's more of you that wants to be known. And you can keep those parts of you in the dark. But the real purpose of having a spiritual experience is to bring more and more of you into the light. To integrate more and more of you as an active expression of who you are. 3. 3 is the question, what are the values that I want to embody now? What are the values that I want to embody? You know, when you look at your values, when we have a profound experience, when we have an experience, oftentimes our core values change. Because we're not being driven by the same values that got us there. There was a time in my life where my values changed pretty dramatically. And with that came a very different change in my life. And what I realized is the new values that I wanted to really embody, I wanted to be happy, free, and wildly in love. And those values created a change that changed everything, right? That it looked like the behavior changed, but what I want you to see is that the values changed. So the question that I have for you tonight is, as we're talking about how you're going to live, one of the things I want you to look at is what are the values that have driven my life? If you looked at this point, in this moment in time, and you told yourself the truth, what are the values that have driven your life? And then the next question becomes, are those the values that I want to drive my life in the future? Because as you change your values, things have to adjust. The priorities change. And being happy, free, and wildly in love was radically different values that caused a change. But I think it was a change for a higher, better part of me. You ready for number 4? The fourth and last question is, it says, what is the good that I can do now? How many of you know that I'm committed to you having what you want? That I'm really here to support you in creating the life that you want, right? One of the things that happens after we've had a profound spiritual experience is that there's a moment where instead of it being totally driven out of you, you actually have to take a break, a moment, a pause, and ask, what is the world, what is the life asking, what is the good that I'm being asked to do now? Like, it's not just what you want, right? But you'll get your needs met. I promise. You'll 100% get your needs met. But it's not just about what you want, but what is the good that you are being called to create, to express? How are you being called to serve now in the greatest possible way? And if it's just generated by what you want, you miss the opportunity to say, what's the world trying to say to me now? What's the good that I can be doing in the world now? Because as you become more and more a higher expression of God, the world is going to put you to work being that. And it might surprise you how the universe is going to use you, what it may look like. It may just surprise you. Has anybody else been surprised by life? That you thought you were going one way, and the universe says, but if you just kind of go this way, the impact that your soul can have on the world is going to be much better. Let's show up that question again. What is the good that I can do now? Right where you are, with your life exactly the way it is right now, what is the good that you can do now? And I invite you to spend some time just in prayer about that. What is the good? With all that I know, with all that I am, with all that I'm called to express, what is the greatest good I can do now? And just let life, let Spirit reveal what that is. Because the reality is that each and every one of us is far more than we've been led to believe. True? And it would just be fantastic if we could just be the little box that we thought that we were. If we could just be the little thing that we thought we were. But the reality is, you're so much more than that. And every time your soul wakes up, every time your soul awakens to the truth of who you are, the entire universe gets excited to use you. Like, ooh, another one just woke up. Woohoo, right? You can almost hear the angels just get giggly, right? That somebody else just got woken up and the universe, there's just more light now. So every time your soul wakes up, I want you to listen to the giggling universe that wants to use you. And trust that if the giggling universe is nudging you in a certain direction, not only is it the highest and the best for you, but it's the highest and the best for everybody on the planet. Because you are an instrument that has decided to wake up. Will you pray with me? I invite you to open your mind, your heart, your soul to the activity of God that is within us and all around us. Tonight, God, just use me. Use each and every one of us in the greatest possible way. Let us share our light, our love, our joy, our wisdom in the greatest possible way. Let us be instruments of the greatest level of good. In the name and through the power of the living Christ, we give thanks, and so it is. Amen.